Yo, what up, street dogs? Eric Kim. All right, so the thought. So there's this nice quote that Friedrich Nietzsche quotes, Fernando Galliani, which is something like, it might have been Voltaire, I'm not sure, but the basic gist is, it's better to be a gay monster than a sentimental bore, and gay not as like homosexual, but gay as in like joyful. So it's better to be a joyful monster than a sentimental bore. So this is kind of an interesting notion, so let me just kind of break it down and share some of my personal thoughts. So basically the gist is, in life, oftentimes, where do we generally go wrong? We go wrong when we try too hard to like please other people, be a good person, self-improvement, blah blah. And let me just kind of share some of my thoughts. So first and foremost, I kind of like this notion of radical self-acceptance or radical extreme self-acceptance, or to allow yourself to, you know, proclaim yourself as a monster or something like that. Because this is the problem. So many of us, we're kind of guilted into feeling like we're bad people. And so, you know, like let me give you a personal example. So sometimes I kind of grew up like, you know, Confucian, Korean American, part utilitarian, part Catholic, Christian, whatever. And generally the gist is you're always like felt guilty and bad and lesser. And so you're essentially taught, you know, you're never good enough, and if you're selfish, you're evil, and you're despicable, and you're so lazy, and nobody likes you, and blah blah. And now what's the downside of all this? The downside is, you're always made to feel bad about everything. So like, if you do something, you know, you're doing it not good enough, so you're gonna fuck up. And then if you're doing something, you don't do none, then you're being lazy and you're being bad. So it's certainly like a catch-22 is that you're kind of fucked either way. Now, what do I advocate for? So I personally advocate maybe it's better for us to have some sort of like radical self-acceptance or whatever, and to be like, yo, you know, actually maybe, who knows, like maybe I am like a crazy, insane, selfish, egocentric, vain, like all the moralistic, ethical things that people say you are, like, you know, you're lazy, you're self-centered, you're vain, you're not productive, you know, you procrastinate, you know, you don't tie your shoes properly, or, you know, whatever it may be. And so if you could just stare all those things in the face and, you know, just have like radical self-acceptance, and then like it doesn't even matter if it's right or wrong, right? It's like people say I'm lazy, vain, self-centered, egotistical, and then you just kind of stare at that, just have that thought in your head and be like, huh, maybe I am. And then ask yourself, am I okay with that? So for example, like a lot of people are like, oh, Eric, you know, you're like a scammer, you're like so into yourself, you're so vain, you're so crazy, you're a hypocrite, you contradict yourself, like all these bad things, right? You know, and then maybe the best is be like, you know, I am, and that's who I am. Cool. And then once you just kind of accept it rather than trying to reject it, you actually feel a lot better. Like, let me give you a practical example. So when I was, so I'm 32, so when I kind of grew up in like middle school, high school, the worst thing a guy could tease another guy is calling them like gay, faggot, and actually I discovered in high school, the best response actually, ironically enough, was be like, yeah, you know, I love dicks, or yeah, I'm gay, so what, right? And then it's funny because once that happened, bullies would get confused. They're like, wait, what? No, you're supposed to feel bad and stuff like that. So once you don't let nobody else make you feel bad by doing some sort of like radical self-acceptance, then also even more so, you don't guilt yourself, because there's a quote from Nietzsche I think about this a lot, is the pang of conscience is indecent, and like oftentimes we say something which we regret and stuff like that. Why is it that my homeboy in the UPS truck? So then the question is like, why is it that we feel so bad about feeling a certain way. And generally we tend to feel bad because society has trained us to feel bad and guilty behind close quarters. It's kind of like, you know, if you're a dude growing up to porn, whatever, it's like you feel so guilty about jacking off or watching porn and you think you're the only one who does it, but then you fucking find out afterwards all your friends do it too and everyone's just super low-key about it. So essentially, I think in a lot of modern society, we're raised with shame, which is interesting because compared to like the ancient Greeks, which I consider one of the highest cultures, ancient Greeks weren't raised with guilt or shame and stuff like that for the most part. They're more about pride, magnanimity, strength, and stuff like that. And at least, you know, since I'm Korean American, Asian American, so much of our culture is based on Confucianism, which is based on like kind of guilt, duty, shame, obedience culture. And even now, I'm trying to unlearn all that, but it takes a while. Because first of all, like, one of the best ways to unlearn something is to actually understand it. So even I started to read Confucius for a bit and just think more about Eastern thought and governance and whatnot. And essentially, for the most part, from a governmental, political perspective, to train people to feel guilty about X, Y, and Z, it's actually very smart because that's the best way to control citizens and peoples, right? To not revolt. And even I think it was Edward Gibbons, or Gibbons, the guy who wrote the book, the big book on the fall of the Roman Empire or whatever, he said something like all leaders find religions, you know, equally false but equally useful in terms of like subjugating the masses or whatever. And so it's kind of an interesting idea because the basic gist is in some ways all major religions, you know, modes of thinking, modern societies and cultures are made you to feel bad about the individual, that the individual is bad and evil and despicable, and the only good is to self-sacrifice yourself for the collective, like kind of like Jesus or whatever. And what is the consequence out of this? Everyone just feeling bad and guilty and, you know, having, you know, not being able to self-develop themselves to the fullest. So yeah, so to just kind of wrap things up, I just wanted to advocate, yeah, maybe think about all the bad qualities of yourself that you consider quote unquote bad. In other contexts might be considered good, right? It's like someone calls you self-centered and egotistical, you know, maybe some other people might call that driven and focused and stuff like that. Or some people call you procrastinating, lazy, but in other contexts that actually might be wise, waiting to make a better decision without making a quick response. So it does seem that, at least for myself personally, the biggest benefit I have had was starting to study philosophy. And the benefit of studying philosophy is you start to realize the history of all these different ways of thinking, these morals, also studying like political history, war history, social history and stuff like that. And then the most useful thing about studying philosophy is that you start to unlearn all the BS in our modern society, and it actually does give you wings. It makes you freer, and it kind of makes you freer, more free to think your own thoughts, to have your own beliefs. And remember, in life, you choose. Like I think Nietzsche quotes the invincible order of the assassins: all is permitted, all is false, I think, or all is true. I don't know, it's, you know, the Assassin's Creed motto is actually based on a real thing. So essentially all truth is subjective. There's no ultimate right or wrong. But yeah, just know that the world and all her cruelty is still beautiful and worthwhile. So yeah, use your life, don't squander it. Continue to push yourself in your self-evolution. Just know that you always got this shit.